fewer ships are passing through, and they're paying higher costs to do so.
Two of the world's most important canals, the Panama and Suez Canals, are being closed after being operational for over a century.
Global shipping is severely disrupted.
This recent news has caused great distress among global trade. Ships are stuck in the Panama Canal due to severe drought. Meanwhile, ships going through the Suez Canal are experiencing delays, forcing some to take a long detour around Africa. With all these problems, all attention is turned to the Arctic Passage, a $43 billion project. But where exactly does this passage lead? And why hasn't it been considered as an option before? Well, you are about to find out. Come along as we take you through this new canal that will definitely destroy the Panama Canal. The Panama and Suez Canal. To better understand why the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal are no longer used as a preferred route, let's take a quick look at how they came to be and their present challenges. The Panama Canal is an artificial 82-kilometer waterway in Panama that connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. This canal helps reduce the time for ships to travel between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, enabling them to avoid the lengthy, hazardous route around the southernmost tip of South America. This massive canal is one of the largest and most difficult engineering projects ever undertaken, and it definitely changed the world when it officially opened on August 15, 1914. So how did this great canal come to be? Let's take a journey back to the gold rush hour of the mid-19th century. Before the creation of the Panama Canal, Panama was often used as a shortcut for shipping goods from New York to California. Ships would dock either on the Pacific or Atlantic side and transport their goods across what is now Panama. Eventually, a railway was constructed to create a shortcut that would help with easier transport. But still, transportation was quite difficult, so slicing through the small land of Panama made a lot of sense. The French began working on creating a canal on January 1, 1881. However, the construction of this canal proved to be more difficult than it seems. This is due to the dense jungle and extreme weather conditions, and soon enough, there was an outbreak of tropical diseases that killed thousands of workers. By 1884, the death rate had increased to over 200 deaths per month. Then on May 4, 1904, the United States took over and purchased the French equipment and excavations, including the Panama Railroad, for $40 million. Coupled with this, the United States also paid the new country of Panama $10 million and a $250,000 payment each following year. Chief Engineer John Frank Stevens, a self-educated engineer who had built the Great Northern Railroad, was put in charge of this new project. After months of building and construction, Stevens came to the conclusion that the sea-level approach was an entirely untenable proposition. He suggested that instead of a sea-level canal, a lock system would be much better. This system would raise and lower ships from a large reservoir 85 feet above sea level. This would create both the largest dam, Gatun Dam, and the largest human-made lake, Gatun Lake, in the world at that time. After 10 years of construction, the Panama Canal was eventually completed in 1914, and an estimated amount of $500 million was used to complete the project. That's equivalent to $15.2 billion in 2024. Now let's talk about the Suez Canal. It is worth noting that the Suez Canal was the major reason why the Panama Canal was created in the first place. This canal is an artificial sea-level waterway located in Egypt that connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. It is 193 kilometers long and is a key trade route between Europe and Asia. Before the creation of this canal, numerous attempts had been made to connect the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. Even the ancient Egyptian civilization were interested in connecting the Nile to the Red Sea at one point. Thousands of years later, during the French campaign in Egypt and Syria in late 1798, Napoleon expressed interest in finding the remnants of an ancient waterway passage. And when he became the French emperor in 1804, he began putting plans in motion to connect the Mediterranean with the Red Sea. But sadly, the plan was abandoned because there was an incorrect belief that this construction would require the need for locks. The belief was based on a hunch that the Red Sea was 28 feet higher than the Mediterranean. However, on April 25, 1859, nearly 60 years later, the construction of the Suez Canal began. French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps was the one in charge of this project. He employed millions of people, some sources estimating them to be more than 1.5 million people. And just like the Panama Canal, the construction of this canal came with its own deaths. with over 120,000 deaths. The construction of the canal ended 10 years later in 1869. Unlike the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal does not use system locks to raise or lower ships passing through its waters. This is thanks to the fact that the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea Gulf of Suez have the same water level, so ships can pass straight through the canal without having to be raised by locks, which makes it faster and more efficient. The Suez Canal was a big deal when it opened, especially for European powers like Britain, which used it to access its colonies. But, as groundbreaking as both canals were at the time they were built, they were by no means perfect or immune to challenges. In fact, recent events have shown that the Panama and Suez Canal are no longer the dependable shipping routes they once were. The current issues facing the Panama and Suez Canal. One of the major issues facing the Suez Canal is the attack of the Houthi rebels. These attacks began on October 19, 2023, when the Iran-backed Houthi movement in Yemen launched missiles and armed drones at Israel, demanding an end to the invasion of the Gaza Strip. But this soon escalated, affecting global trade as the Houthi rebels began targeting ships that have little or no connection to Israel. From October 2023 to March 2024, the Houthis attacked more than 60 vessels in the Red Sea, and the impact of these attacks has been huge. You see, the Red Sea and Suez Canal typically handles about 12% of global trade traffic, with about 30% of the world's shipping containers flowing through its waterway. So far in 2024, traffic through the Suez Canal is down by 64% compared to last year. Instead, several shipping companies are responding to these attacks by taking a longer route around the Cape of Good Hope, which is a much longer and more expensive journey. That's because traveling via the Cape of Good Hope can delay the trip by over a week, in some cases adding 12 to 20 extra days to their journey. Take, for example, a ship sailing from Shanghai to New York via the Suez, which will have to travel nearly 12,370 nautical miles. But via the Cape of Good Hope, the distance increases to about 14,460 nautical miles. But the Houthi attack isn't the only crisis the Suez Canal faced. The Suez Canal also suffered from piracy in Somalia, and to avoid this, many shipping companies chose to take the long route instead. This long journey around the Cape of Good increases transportation costs, and these higher costs combined with the longer routes are putting a strain on global trade, making the Suez Canal a far less attractive option for shipping companies. On the other side of the world, the Panama Canal also faces its own crises because of its severe drought. The water levels are so low that authorities had to cut the ships passing through by more than a third. That's because with the low water levels, larger and heavier ships might get stuck. These large ships also need more water to lift them up in the locks. Also, one of the major reasons why the drought is getting worse is due to two major factors: El Niño and global warming. El Niño is a natural event that brings warmer air and water to the west coast of the Americas. It's like a big wave of warmth that can last around 9 to 12 months. This time, the heat wave is especially strong, and it's expected to continue at least until April 2024. On top of that, 2023 was the hottest year on record, with temperatures reaching up to 1.35 degrees higher than usual. The fluctuations of the El Niño are caused by global climate change, and scientists warn that these fluctuations will only get worse as time goes on. So now the shipping industry is being affected, as the Panama Canal usually handles up to 40% of the US container traffic. And these disruptions are having ripple effects across supply chains. With all these problems we've seen so far, a solution is needed. But what can be done to restore efficient global trade? Luckily, there's a solution to the ongoing problem, and that is the Old Northwest Passage. The Old Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage is a sea route that connects the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. This passage winds through the Arctic Ocean and Canada's Arctic Island, which is along the northern coast of North America. This route is located 500 miles north of the Arctic Circle and less than 1,200 miles from the North Pole. It consists of a series of deep channels through Canada's Arctic archipelago, extending about 900 miles from east to west, from the north of Baffin Island to the Beaufort Sea, above the US state of Alaska. However, the story of how the Northwest Passage came to be is quite interesting. The first ever recorded attempt to discover the Northwest Passage was the east-west voyage of John Cabot in 1497. But Cabot wasn't actually on a quest to find the Northwest Passage. He was sent by Henry VII in search of a direct route to the Orient. 5 years before John Cabot went on his expedition, Columbus had tried to look for a new way to reach Asia by sailing west. He wanted to do this because the usual land routes from Europe to Asia were blocked by the Ottoman Empire, which had taken over the Middle East. The Columbus expedition greatly influenced John Cabot, who later went on a personal expedition. But the harsh weather and low supply of food proved too difficult for Cabot. After this, several European explorers began a quest to find the Northwest Passage. Famous explorers like Jacques Cartier, Sir Francis Drake, Sir Martin Frobisher, and Captain James Cook all met with failure, and many met with disaster. Sir Humphrey Gilbert, for example, wrote about the Northwest Passage, which inspired others to find it. But he drowned in 1583 while trying to find it himself. Later, Henry Hudson, who also made an attempt to find this passage, was left stranded on sea with his young son and 7 others in 1611, and he was never seen again. During his search, Hudson had found Hudson Bay, but it was not the route he was looking for. Instead, this passage proved to be an icy trap. The quest for the Northwest Passage continued for centuries, and more explorers risked their lives in finding this passage. One of the most famous and tragic expeditions was led by British explorer Sir John Franklin in 1845. This expedition was well prepared, as plans were made to map the last unexplored part of the Northwest Passage. Franklin went with 2 ships, 34 men, and 3 years' worth of supplies. But this expedition also ended in disaster because Franklin and his crew never returned. Soon enough, rescue teams searched the waters and made new maps. Over time, many artifacts from the expedition were found, including notes that the ships got stuck in ice in 1846. The notes also said that Franklin died in 1847 and another captain took charge. Despite Franklin's mission ending in tragedy, the information gathered during his expedition helped map portions of the Northwest Passage. After so many deaths and losses, the first complete navigation of the Northwest Passage didn't happen until 1906, when Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen sailed through the entire route. He made this journey between 1903 and 1906 with a small crew of 6 people. The reason behind Amundsen's expedition was to avoid debt collectors, but his simple getaway led to historic achievements that made him famous. Using a small fishing boat named Gjøa, Amundsen was able to sail in shallow waters, which helped him complete the journey. His achievements were remarkable, inspiring other explorers to sail the Northwest Passage with enthusiasm. Years later, from 1940 to 1942, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police vessel made history by becoming the first ship to sail the Northwest Passage in both directions from west to east and back again. Today, with the Arctic ice melting at an alarming rate, the Northwest Passage may be the answer to the ongoing problems facing the Panama and Suez Canal. With what we've seen so far, there's no doubt that one can say the Northwest Passage is going to be very difficult to navigate. But advances in technology and changing environmental conditions are making it a possible alternative to the Panama and Suez Canal. This forgotten route might just be the key to solving the modern challenges of global shipping, making us wonder if it's time to transition from the Panama and Suez Canal to the Northwest Passage. The new transition. Now that we have the interesting details of the Northwest Passage covered, let's see why it would be a good alternative route for ships. The Arctic Ocean is melting faster than ever before. Since 1979, the calculated amount of ice said to be lost is about 3.15 million of summer ice. That's like losing an area the size of India. The ice in the Arctic Ocean is getting smaller by 76,800 square kilometers every year. This rapid change makes the once impossible idea of using the Northwest Passage as a major shipping route increasingly possible. This means that ships might soon be able to use the Northwest Passage, which goes through Canada's Arctic. If the ice melts enough, ships could sail through the passage in the summer and get from Asia to North America's east coast faster than using the Suez Canal. On December 13, 2007, scientists revealed in a meeting at the American Geophysical Union that there were fewer clouds over the western Arctic than the year before. This meant more sunlight reached the Earth, warming the ocean and melting the sea ice in the Arctic. As a result, the Northwest Passage could become open for ships to sail through. Also, the Northern Sea route is also seen as another shortcut that could work. This route is along Russia's Arctic coast that connects Europe to Asia, saving around 40% of travel distance. Although Russia has used this route since the Soviet era, the facilities and roads along it still need improvement. A groundbreaking moment happened in 2013 when a big cargo ship called the Nordic Orion sailed through the Northwest Passage with the help of a special ice-breaking ship. This shortcut saved the Nordic Orion 4 days of travel time and an estimated $200,000 in fuel costs. By taking this route, the ship was able to avoid the longer journey around the southern tip of South America, which made the trip much faster and more cost-effective. Scientists have made predictions using computer models that by the end of this century, the Northwest Passage will be open for ships to sail through for an extra 2 to 4 months. This means that the sailing season will be longer, making it easier for ships to travel through. Additionally, some researchers believe that the Northwest Passage will become much more accessible and easier to navigate by the mid-21st century, specifically between 2030 and 2059. When the Northwest Passage becomes open for shipping, it will only change the world for good. The distance for most voyages will be shortened by at least 7,000 kilometers compared to taking the long route through the Panama Canal or around South Americas. This will cause ships to travel faster and save a lot of time. Plus, the shorter distance will lead to huge savings on fuel and other costs, making shipping much cheaper. This is great news for shipping companies, who will jump at the chance to save money. As a result, we can expect to see many big ships using the Northwest Passage during its ice-free periods in the future, making it a busy and important shipping route. But the question now is, will the Northwest Passage become a regular route for ships? Well, the answer to that is not if, but when. In other words, it's no longer a matter of whether the Northwest Passage will become a regular shipping route, but rather a matter of when it will happen. With the ice melting at an increasing rate, we need to start making plans for the construction of this new canal. Additionally, we also need to consider how to avoid challenges facing the Suez and Panama Canal from reoccurring. The challenges of building a new canal in the Northwest Passage. The first thing we need to consider is that developing the Northwest Passage as a shipping route will require a lot of money. We are talking about millions, if not billions, of dollars here. Just like the Panama and Suez Canals, which had millions of dollars invested, the Northwest Passage may require more funding than we can possibly imagine. First, good engineers will be needed to see if the construction of a canal is possible, and if approved, the creation of ports, terminals, and navigation systems will be built from scratch, because there is nothing up there as of now. Coupled with this, icebreakers are also needed. Due to the cold conditions of the Northwest Passageways, icebreakers are needed to break and navigate the cold terrain of the water. Icebreakers are strong ships that sail through icy waters and clear a path for other boats and ships to follow safely. And these ships require a lot of money to build and maintain, but if we want to keep the route open throughout the year, icebreakers are important. Another challenge we need to look at is that the Arctic Ocean is unpredictable. The ice conditions are constantly changing, with icebergs, floes, and shifting ice constantly changing, so the ships passing through these routes need to be able to withstand the freezing temperatures and icy waters. Also, the weather changes a lot. From thick fog to storms and rapid drops in temperature, it's important to note that the Northwest Passage goes through the waters of 3 countries: Canada, the US, and Greenland. When the ice melts, the relationships between these countries could affect whether ships can easily travel through. And these relationships may create new policies for ships that plan to navigate through its waters. Currently, there are no existing policies that determine who can and cannot pass through the Northwest Passage. In the past, Canada and the United States have made some agreements about their relationship considering the Northwest Passage and its usage, but beyond that, most countries have developed their own opinions regarding the ownership of the Northwest Passage. Even the Inuit living in Canada have separate claims about the ownership of the Northwest Passage, and this can cause a disagreement among the various countries bordering its waters. With the amount of money that will be invested in this project, it also raises the important question of whether the water can be accessed freely. This can give Canada an upper hand in playing a crucial role in the world. You see, if Canada opens the Northwest Passage for international trade, they would have a say in the global trade of the world, making them gain more influence. But with all these challenges that might likely arise, we need not forget the environmental challenges. Here's our subscriber pick for the day. With all we've talked about so far, the new canal that is being built will definitely destroy the Panama Canal. This is due to the fact that ships traveling through the Northwest Passage beat the Panama Canal by 50%. Yet with all we've discussed, one might wonder if developing a canal in the Northwest Passage is worth the hassle. If you think about it, this will definitely greatly benefit global trade, but spending billions of dollars on developing the Northwest Passage may be more difficult than it seems. This is coupled with a harsh climate environment and the challenging water terrain of the Northwest Passage. Besides, would it not be better to look for a way to solve the ongoing challenges facing Panama and the Suez Canal? The Panama Canal, for example, is investing in a $1.6 billion reservoir to resolve its water shortage. This will help secure water so that ships can easily pass through. So, should the Northwest Passage be built? Or should we stick to the Panama and Suez Canal and try to fix its ongoing problems? Join the conversation and share your thoughts with us in the comments section down below. Now, let's get back to the video. Environmental challenges. As exciting as it is to build a new canal, we need to also consider the environmental impact it will have on the world. First, developing the Northwest Passage will massively impact the wildlife of the Arctic oceans. This ocean is home to various wildlife animals, and the fragile ecosystem of the Arctic Ocean will cause these animals to be endangered. Recent studies have shown that the ships navigating through the Northwest Passage are affecting various fish and mammals. The polar cod, for example, is affected by the noise of the ship passing through its waters. This noise is changing how polar cod swim and behave, and the reduction of these fish affects the food for seabirds, marine mammals, and people who live there. Among the mammals there, most people think polar bears are the main animals affected, but actually narwhals and beluga whales are suffering more. Narwhals need sea ice to survive, and beluga whales are very sensitive to noise in the water. Also, the Arctic oceans are said to have huge amounts of oil, gas, and valuable minerals that haven't been exploited. It's estimated to hold 90 billion barrels of oil, a fifth of the world's natural gas, and precious metals like rare earths, which are crucial for new technologies. These rare earth materials are mostly controlled by China, and it will give Canada a new edge in the technology industry. This is driving a new gold rush among northern nations competing to get their hands on these valuable resources. Analysts have already speculated that this will cause an Arctic Cold War. This is fueling more military buildup and increasing tensions between countries. Lastly, the issues of oil spills will also negatively impact the environment. The harsh conditions of the Arctic make it extremely difficult to clean up oil spills. If a spill were to occur in these waters, it would be quite difficult to contain and could have a dangerous effect on the ecosystem. Besides, studies have shown that oil spills in cold environments like the Arctic Ocean can harm wildlife, contaminating food sources and disrupting local communities. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.